Romanticism within anime and manga is really often an underlying thematic element that is within the story, but is generally not fleshed out very heavily as the events and motivations of the story far outweigh the romantic elements. I am here today to present to you all the greatest romance within modern anime, and no, it isn't from a romance genre as you'd think. Rather, it is from a story that focuses on medieval magic knights, demons, giants, and fairies. Seven Deadly Sins was the very first manga I ever read from chapter 1 up until its conclusion, and at that point I had watched anime religiously since I was a kid, but I never really delved into the world of manga until after rewatching Seven Deadly Sins countless times. And yes, before you comment, this was long before the terrible animation that was Escanor vs. Meliodas. Rather, I picked up the manga right after season 2 concluded. Not only do I love the era the story is set in, the characters, and the unique lore, but what I love more than anything is the underlying elements of love within this story that particularly encapsulated me. The motivations of my two favorite characters within Seven Deadly Sins, those being Meliodas, the Dragon Son of Wrath, and Ban, the Fox Son of Greed, they're all deeply rooted in both their respective loves within Elizabeth and Elaine. I truly believe Seven Deadly Sins contains the most tragic and plot-centric love stories within all of anime and manga. Within Elizabeth, Meliodas spends centuries trying to end the cycle of perpetual reincarnation. He's having to continually watch the woman he loves fall in love with him, regain her memories, and die once more, only to be brought back to life to repeat this sick cycle. A fate worse than death in the case of Meliodas, but our protagonist's motives to end this cycle are clouded throughout a good portion of this story. Rather, Meliodas outwardly is a happy-go-lucky pervy captain of the Seven Deadly Sins, but internally he rages against the idea of losing Elizabeth once more, and he curses the supreme deity and demon king for subjecting him to this fate. Meliodas goes so far as to assemble the Seven Deadly Sins in order to achieve his goal to stop this sick cycle. The assemblance of this group of brandished sinners was not for greater altruistic motives, it was instead for saving himself and Elizabeth from the torturous reality that separates them from loving each other with full knowledge of the past and living the way they once did together long before the curse. Elizabeth has a hold over Meliodas that obviously wasn't just her looks, which based on season 1 and 2, you could imagine that would likely be why. No, Elizabeth 3,000 years ago met Meliodas, and Meliodas chose her over his own demon clan, his family. He abandoned his position of power within the leader of the Ten Commandments. The mutual love of a goddess and a demon was unheard of. The races had waged war against each other for as long as history existed. Their relationship was damned both by the supreme deity and the demon king. Both Meliodas and Elizabeth, through their decision to love each other, they were cursed by the supreme leaders of their races, particularly with the aforementioned punishment that they viewed as far worse than death. We mentioned Elizabeth's perpetual reincarnation, but Meliodas too shared a similar curse, in his case, immortality. His immortality caused him to bear witness to all 107 Elizabeths that had come and gone before his very eyes. The other stipulation of his immortality was that if he were to die, he would come back with less and less of his humanity and his emotions intact. Meliodas struggles with this particular concept after defeating Fraudrin, as he did so in no remorse. Meliodas is caught between the struggle of needing to become stronger, thereby losing a part of his emotions, and wanting to remain who he really is. He fears more than anything becoming what he used to be before he met Elizabeth, and we can see Meliodas shed tears sitting with Elizabeth in discussion of this. Meliodas, the steadfast leader, the optimistic captain, and the Dragon Son of Wrath, fully shows how much he struggles with his mission to stop this curse once and for all, and all it entails. The story is continually pushed forth by this drive, Meliodas not aiming to become the greatest of anything as most stories go, but rather to merely exist and love the woman he cares for more than anything. The lengths that Meliodas is willing to go to accomplish this includes giving up his humanity and becoming the next heir to the Demon King, all on the belief that if he gains this power, he will finally be able to end the curse, and this motivation leads us from episode 1 until the conclusion. What I love about Meliodas and Elizabeth is that it demonstrates the human-like propensity to forsake all other things for the sake of what we as humans love. Power, wealth, fame, they all pale in comparison to what we love and which we seek to protect. Underneath the happy-go-lucky captain indeed is the man who inherited the title of Dragon Son of Wrath from his destruction in Danafor after the death of Elizabeth in his arms once more. Our Dragon Son of Wrath, despite any outward appearance, is an individual willing to destroy the entire world for the woman he loves. In this depth of unquestionable and unwavering love, I will forever cherish within the story. Similarly to his best friend Meliodas, Bond's character progression and underlying motivation as well is to protect and be with the person he holds above everyone else, that being Elaine. One of my favorite quotes from Ban is, "I figured that if I live long enough, something good might happen." Ban, plagued by existence and life itself, underneath all his outward bravado and carelessness, is haunted by depression, but he never fully embraces nihilism. He believes eventually something good may happen, which propels his search for the fountain of youth which grants immortality. A once thief who entered the Fairy King's forest only to be met by a fairy within Elaine, and within their time together, they rapidly fell in love. Ban went as far as to say that the week they spent together had been the best moments of his entire life. Tragically before his eyes, similarly to his captain, he lost Elaine, who in her final moments kissed Ban and gave him the fountain of youth, granting him immortality that he initially sought after. Ban and Meliodas, both with their own forms of immortality, have no one to share it with. Before Elaine's death, Ban promises that one day he'll make her his, thereby wanting to eventually negate this immortality and transfer it to her in order to spend an active life with her. From here on out, Ban goes through the stages of grief, seeking annihilation but unable to self-destruct due to his newfound immortality. This eventually leads to his attempted execution by officials, and he's recruited by Meliodas, who gives him a sense of purpose and life that he had long since lost after Elaine. Ban is a character haunted by his inability to protect Elaine, and outwardly he expresses none of the sort. Rather, he exemplifies a carefree nature with no sense of anything aloof. Ban is a character I can relate to heavily. Despite what he faces internally, he never fully expresses it. And this toxic quality leads to this continual emptiness within Ban, who despite trying to quell his mind with drinking, inevitably when alone in his own thoughts, dwells on his imperfection, his inability to protect, and his loss of Elaine. Ban, who is rescued and shown life by Meliodas, eventually wagers with the Goddess clan, and they tell him that they could resurrect Elaine if he killed Meliodas, a wager to kill his best friend in order to regain the person he loves. Ban, an imperfect individual, a greedy man at that, as brandished by that sin, takes this offer and tries to kill Meliodas, which inevitably fails. Both have their own goals here which aren't fully stated, but both are wanting to, in a sense, resurrect the woman they love, and both are unwilling to die before they do so. As the story progresses for Ban, at one point he calls Meliodas out for not understanding the difficulty of having to watch Elaine die before his eyes, as she was briefly brought back by the demon race. And eventually, after learning that Meliodas not only knows the difficulty, but he knows it on a far worse scale, Ban decides to protect his friend within Meliodas and go through purgatory itself for countless years to retrieve his emotions. During this time in purgatory, despite being the foxen of greed with his ability of snatch, in which he's always taken from others, he learns to use that ability to rather do the opposite, to give. And in one of my favorite scenes within all of storytelling, Ban eventually returns to the real world with such an insane power-up of strength, destroying demons effortlessly. He gives up what seemed to be his greatest power, his immortality. He instead gives it to Elaine, finally fulfilling his lifelong promise to one day make her his. Ban clearly here values his time with Elaine much more than he values the prospect of possibly living forever. The two most important characters within the Seven Deadly Sins story, Meliodas and Ban, are entirely driven and motivated by their love of Elizabeth and Elaine. The story's progression for them was never to become something super strong or super prestigious, rather to protect and be with the ones they care about, a quite simplistic goal. Meliodas wages war on all races. Ban forsakes everything including his own life. Both in doing so and battling these internal demons, they never surrender their wish of a life with their respective lovers. This take within storytelling is refreshing. Often the motivation of characters lies in becoming something greater, which is something we obviously love as a reader and watcher, but similarly in real life, often seeking something greater can lead to feelings of never being content, as we're never happy with where we are right now. Meliodas and Ban teach us that what can bring true joy and contentment isn't the achievement of necessarily something greater, it's the appreciation of a normal life with those we love and care for. Seven Deadly Sins for me has impacted me so greatly with these elements of realism it displays within the emotional states of Meliodas and Ban. They stopped at nothing to make their love story a true reality despite having to face literal hell itself. In my opinion, their efforts to protect and be with both Elizabeth and Elaine are the greatest love story within anime and manga. I'm really glad I was finally able to discuss the Seven Deadly Sins, as this story has long since held a large place in my heart. If you enjoy these analytical videos, please let me know in the comment section below, and if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe. I love making content for you guys, and I hope you all have a lovely day. As always, be greedier, and I will catch you all next time.